It's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
Westbrook stops at the 1 and goes down to a knee.
Bitter labor dispute caused the cancellation of the playoffs.
You don't know when he's going to be back. Two really serious concussions.
Hello and welcome back to How to Fantasy Sports. In today's video, what we're going to look at is our approach to drafting in an auction style draft. We're not going to look at what players to take specifically, but what we're going to do is give you a general idea about auction drafts and the tips and strategies that you might want to use for drafting in them. In an auction draft, team owners get a fixed amount of money at which they can use to bid on players for drafting onto their team. The highest bid wins, and players are nominated for bidding by the team owners in a sequential fashion. Now, auction style drafts are great because it ensures that every team owner has a chance to draft the players that they want for their team, even if that means hilariously and tragically overbidding on those players. Now, it is a little bit more complicated and a harder drafting format, so a lot of rookie players tend to stay away from them. But every effort should be made to get into an auction style draft simply because it's more fun and you are more likely to get the players that you want on your team. So what is our strategy for approaching an auction style draft? Well, first, always review your league settings. Know how much money that you're going to get for drafting your team. After that, total the number of players total that will be drafted in your league, as well as total the number of players that will be drafted at each position in your league. Now, that'll be a little bit harder because some of the players will fill bench positions, but it'll give you an idea on how deep into each position you'll need to go. Once you know that, take a look back at how the players performed in your league and your settings from last year. You already determined the number of players that you think will be drafted in each position in your league. Say it's 20. So take a look back at the top 20 players in that position from last year. Now, take a look at the point difference between the top and the 20th position. If the point spread is great, that means that there's positional scarcity in that position. And if it's not great, that means there's not as much positional scarcity. The greater the positional scarcity, that's a position that you want to target early in your draft and make sure that you get higher ranked players. If there's less scarcity, then that's a position that you can wait until the end of your draft for filling in later. And you can handle taking a lower ranked player because of it. Next, imagine drafting your own personal dream team. As if money doesn't matter, you can choose any player to fill your positions. Now, chances are you'll choose all the top ranked players and you'll project well over budget, and that's okay. But using the positional scarcity that we talked about earlier, start swapping in lower ranked players for positions where there isn't a lot of scarcity. You'll start to see your projected value come down. Keep swapping them in and out until you come down below your projected value. And what you'll be left with is an idea of the type of team that you can afford. The top ranked in this position, the 6th ranked in that position, the 10th ranked in that position. So you'll have a better understanding at the draft what it is the type of team that you think you'll be able to afford. Now, during an auction, the top ranked players usually will go for over their projected amount, somewhere between 0 to 20% as a rough estimate. Now, it's very important then when you're performing your analysis that you do add in a little bit of margin for those top ranked players and having to spend a little bit more of your budget on them. Now, overbidding on the higher ranked players at the beginning of your draft is great because what it does is it actually makes the players at the back end of your draft cheaper, sometimes even low as $1. And those $1 players can really turn a lot of value for us during the course of the season. Now, how can you forecast where these $1 players will come? Well, first, take a look at the total amount of money that will be used in your league for the draft. So say you're in a 10-team league that has a $200 budget per team for the draft. It means there'll be $2,000 spent in the draft. Then, if you sum up, starting at the highest ranked player, the projected values, until you reach 2,000, that player will represent essentially the cutoff level for where your players will drop into the $1 territory. Now, as you're drafting, you'll see that as, say, someone spends 10% more on the high-ranked player, well, that amount of money, that corresponding 10% value, will be removed from your bottom level and pushing up that line to where the $1 players will appear. So, how well you're able to forecast how much overbidding will happen in your league will help you to understand where the low value is, lowest values are, the $1 players, for the back end of your draft. And this can really help us for accurately planning how much money we have to spend on the players that we want on our team. Okay, that's a lot of information to get through, and I hope that it makes sense. Our goal here was for you to understand a little bit more about what auctions are and how you can accurately prepare for them. A lot of rookie players don't want to play auction drafts because they're not very comfortable with the format. Plus, they tend not to spend a lot of money at the beginning of drafts, and that's not necessarily a great strategy, because if you stockpile money, you'll have a lot of money at the end of your draft where players are going for very minimal amounts, and you'll end up with a lot of money left over. You should never end up with any money left over in an auction draft. Now, what are some of the strategies and tips that we can use to be more successful in our auction drafting? Well, first, practice. Practice, practice, practice. You should be mock drafting all the time. Not only will it give you a chance to see if the team that you want to draft is possible for drafting, but it'll get you more comfortable with the drafting process, dealing with aggressive bidders, dealing with non-aggressive bidders, and how to take advantage of the process in general. Number 2, know your opponents. Knowing your opponents, especially the teams that they like or the players that they like, can help you by draining financial resources from those players, as they're going to keep bidding higher and higher to get the players that they like on their team. The more money that you can take away from the other owners, the better it will be for you. Number 3, spend the majority of your money on your starting lineup. Fill your benches with $1 bargain bin players, some of your deep sleepers or something like that. But don't spend money on players that are going to sit on your benches. Besides, with injuries and free agent pickups during the season, you'll always be able to change the dynamics of your team and improve it, even if you weren't successful with your draft. Number 4, there is no magic formula for how much to spend on each position in your league. The better option is identify the key players that you want to target and figure out how to build the best team around those key players. Number 5, don't spend money on low value positions. Those are the positions where the point spread between the higher ranked players and the lower ranked players isn't that great. For example, if you're playing fantasy football, those are like your kickers and your defenses. There's just no reason to be spending more than $1 on either of those two positions. Number 6, when it's your turn to nominate players, especially in the earlier rounds, always try to nominate those name players, those older veteran guys who probably don't do as well as they could, but people always think, well, maybe they still have one more season in them. The idea is, especially when people have a lot of money, is that they'll be freely spending up to those projected value amounts and maybe even more. Now, whereas if they came up later in the draft, they just as easily go for under projected value. This is a great strategy for taking money away from your opponents earlier in the draft, allowing you to pick up more players later. And number 7, never nominate your sleepers for bidding unless you know that you have the money to get them. It's better to let your sleepers lie low and keep draining money from your opponents until the end of the draft before you start nominating your sleepers. Anyway, I hope that all makes sense. I know it's a lot of information, but we just want to make you feel more comfortable with the auction drafting process. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, give us an email at question@howtofantasysports.com. Otherwise, you can subscribe to this channel to keep watching out for our next video. Thank you very much.